Welcome to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast, the official podcast of the Johnson & Johnson Cooperative Learning Institute. Welcome to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast. My name is Adam Rubachek. With me, as always, is Aaron Fleming.
Buenos días, compadres.
Este nuevo. And, of course, Derrick Swistek.
Hey.
And that's always the same.
I added a hey this time.
There was another hey in there.
Es el mismo. So we've been talking about those teachers that are new to cooperative learning and how we can best support them. We ended last week talking about feedback that you should be requesting. So whether it's from a trusted friend that's going through the process with you, or possibly even an administrator and evaluator, the question that we left it on was, what kind of feedback should you be looking for? So if you're going to be proactive and you're going to go out there and try to get some critical eyes on your cooperative learning practice, what should you be asking for someone to look for or listen for when you're doing cooperative activities?
One thing that I really recommend for anybody seeking feedback is something I learned from my instructional coach at Maine West. I'm going to give mad props to Christy. Christy came in and we devised a plan where, and this is, I think I had been teaching cooperative learning for a really long time, but I had a class that just wasn't functioning like I wanted them to function. So I had her do student observations, and I wanted to really know that when I was across the room, as I was doing my purposeful walk through the classroom, and I'm over here, can she see the social skills still in place, still being used when I'm not within that physical proximity? Can she see the interdependence at work when I'm not right there? And that was such a good view for me to see where it was happening, where it was not happening. And, then, the reflection afterward, like, which groups really need some more social skill feedback, which groups need a little bit more praise. And that's the big one for me, is when I'm not right there, what are those student to student interactions like?
Yeah, that's a pretty high level that feedback that you'd like. I'm gonna make it even simpler. I was thinking, could somebody write cooperative learning lesson plan after observing your class, like of what it did? Like, could they just say, here's Tired Frog, here's the positive interdependence that I actually saw, here are the pieces, here's how you did individual accountability, or here's what I saw for individual accountability, here's what I saw for group processing, here's what I saw for social skills. And it could be that they didn't see one or more of those things, and that would still be okay, but it would be room for growth. So I would just start with those 5 elements. Like, did the observer see those things? Could you see those things? And that could be, and like we talked about last week, that could be something that you could go over with your evaluator. Make sure that they really know those 5 essential elements really well. Talk to them really hard about positive interdependence, what social skills are, all those pieces, and then see if they can pick those out. And if they can, great. And if they can't, then they're not present enough, and you're not giving enough guidance for the students to be able to say, like, how you're doing something and why you're doing it that way. Like, I think one of the things that we talk about, and we've talked about many times on this show, we need to give kids the whys of what we're doing. It's not just like, here, do this thing. It's like, no, we're doing this thing, and here's why we're doing it this way. Here's the skills that you're developing. Here are the things that you're getting better at. And here's why the class gets better every time that you're here. It helps them with their own, efficacy and their own view of their self, right? A view of themselves and view of others too.
Derrick, I really like the involvement of the student voice in that. If we ask a student, like you said, what's the why? If we ask them, what was the purpose of you working with your group today? If they can tell you, the same way we talk about assessment and can you identify the learning target, and what is the summative going to look like, and when is that? If we ask them, what social skill are you working on right now? What is, and maybe not using the word interdependence, but maybe using the word interdependence if that's something you've introduced. Like, how are you relying on your partners right now, and how are you going to be responsible for this information? At what point in the lesson did you talk about how you work together, and did you share that information as a class? Basically, if the students could fill out that cooperative learning lesson plan, then you're doing cooperative learning. Is it observable by an outsider? But then can your students tell you what's up?
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a really great idea. I think sometimes it might be useful to have the student as an observer. Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to find all of those things, I think sometimes. But even just asking them for one of those pieces that you really wanted and asking them to be able to do it. I think that was something that we talked about on an academic turn, which is, could a kid write their own learning target for what they learned that day? Could they reflect back on, okay, what was I supposed to get out of today? And if they can't, is that something that they should be able to do? So yeah, reflecting back on and thinking about the group processing piece, reflecting back on like, what did I do? What did we do as a group too?
And then if you know you're being observed on that, or the students are going to be asked about that, you're going to be so explicit in your instruction. If I prep Aaron to come into my classroom and say, all right, make sure my students know when I'm group processing and why I'm group processing, I sure as heck am going to explain that to them, and I'm going to make sure that they know. And now we're doing the group process, everybody. And after a little while of it being forced, it becomes rote. This is just something we do in class.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I mean, we talked about this many times on this show, which is the reason that we've stuck with this is because we want to get better at it too. It's one of these things that the more you talk about this and the more you like really delve deep into it, and you realize like how good it is for building relationships and the long-term implications of getting better at all of these things. It really resonates really well with yourself as a teacher, with your want and what you want to leave behind, the legacy you want to leave behind for your students isn't necessarily, hopefully, about love of Spanish language. That may be important, but in the grand scheme of things, it also is about like what things, how did we do this together? How did we get it through together? I think that's the piece in your brain as a teacher that can get better. And so getting that feedback back from the students is really powerful.
We have to be in that learner mode ourselves. And I would be lying if I said that I never have any problems myself, trying to get kids to have those ideal interactions on a daily basis. I may or may not have a class right now as we speak, that's made me really reflect back and really have students, I'm trying to get them to process out, what are we doing? And we're trying to get through that. So we're not getting the optimal interdependence. We're not getting that buy-in that I want. So I'm having the students reflect. And then, I've got to be able to bounce that off of, my coach to say, I need to figure out what's the one social skill I need to hit here. Or is there a different way that I can hold kids accountable individually? To Derrick's point in our last episode, go through each individual element. So even this many years in, after having taught so many of these classes cooperatively, after having taught so many teachers about cooperative learning, it's still about getting feedback for those times when, let's face it, you're trying to get adolescents to cooperate, and adolescents can be real tough, as we all know.
And Aaron, I think that's a great point, that people such as yourself that are veterans, that have been doing cooperative learning, that have been fully enmeshed in this, have trained, like we said, hundreds of teachers, that you're still working on getting better, that you still struggle with it. I think that's a lesson that we can give to our new adherents. This is a process. This is something that you're always going to be wrestling with. You're always going to be struggling with. There's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, but ultimately, every lesson, every time that you build cooperative practice into your classroom, the students are going to learn more. They're going to be nicer to each other. They're going to have lessons that they take out of the classroom. Like, it's an added benefit, even when it's hard, even when you struggle, even when it doesn't feel like you're doing a good thing, you're doing a good thing.
Yeah, I'll leave on this note too, which is, the more that you're in this, the more you feel like you can learn. I remember one time David Johnson was running a class that I was in, and he he was talking about something, and I interjected with something, and he was like, "Oh, that's really brilliant. How did you think of that?" I was like, "I was on page 43 of the book that you wrote." So talk about, just your feeling of like, it is complex. There is a lot to it, and there's a lot to forget, or there's a lot to kind of forget that you knew that. That's one of the things that you can get really, really well from somebody who's also going through it with you, one or two people, a little cohort of people that are going to be on this journey with you too.
And with that, I think we can wrap up this series. And it's been a great talk and a little bit of a trip down memory lane of those early days and how we got into cooperative learning. But next week, I think we have our interview scheduled with Allison Guest, Assistant Principal for Instruction at Maine East High School, who is probably the first of all of our group of cooperative learning trainers to go into administration. So we're anxious to hear kind of her journey and some of the lessons that she's learned in leading cooperative work, first as a teacher, leader, instructional coach, and then into the administrative realm. But until then,
let's cooperate.
Thank you for listening to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast, the official podcast of the Johnson & Johnson Cooperative Learning Institute. Please check out the show notes for all relevant links, including a link to our Twitter account and the Cooperative Learning Institute webpage. This podcast is copyrighted under the Creative Commons license, copyright 2021. Theme music courtesy of Jimmy Ryan.